Hi there, everyone. So, really strange times we're living in now, huh? Incredible, intense energies are flowing in. And if you're aware of the astrology that's happening, especially now during this year, it's not surprising. And yet, believe it or not, as challenging and unpredictable and chaotic as your life might be at this time, there are very positive and exciting times that we are living in now. Everything that's happening is occurring in order to birth the new Earth and the new 5D you. And this birth, which in a way is actually a rebirth, is now finally happening. And yes, I know, for most of us, it's not an easy birth. As prepared as we might have thought we would be for these times, our experiences can still be really upsetting and unexpectedly intense. And this is because we are also experiencing, right along with the birth of our new selves, a death of our old 3D selves. So the process is really, really confusing. For instance, if you feel like you're somehow being thrown around by your life, or you're stumbling around in unknown territory, like you're not in charge of your life at this point, and you're feeling a lot of anxiety or dread or fear, or if all your emotions seem to be much more intense than ever before, know that this is all part of the birth and death process that you're going through. Or you might feel as if you're essentially not recognizing who you've become. This is happening for people. Or maybe your relationships are going weird on you, really intense. This is happening for most couples that I'm aware of these days. Again, an old you is disappearing and a new you is coming into being. Or another scenario, you may be feeling utterly bored with your life. You're feeling totally empty, finished, with no desire to keep going, feeling no pleasure in life anymore, or like there's anything more you want to do or explore. Kind of like you're just standing still, not moving ahead anywhere. Again, know that this is all part of this death and rebirth process. It's one of the phases you can go through. Or maybe you're just experiencing time weirdnesses. Like time is totally speeding up. There's no time to do all you have to do. Or you're having total memory lapses. This is really common. Or your body is somehow feeling discombobulated or dense or awkward. And maybe confusing pains are coming and going. Sleep patterns are really getting weird for people. So if you're feeling any of these things, do know that you are not crazy. Nothing is wrong with you. You're actually right on track in your ascension process. And indeed, there are many, many reasons now for feeling so out of sorts, so lost and anxious when that happens, not quite knowing what's happening for you. And the first reason, of course, is something you need to just keep remembering, and that's that you're in the middle and now toward the end of a monumental ascension process, a shift into a hugely higher frequency. Ascension really is a chaotic and confusing process, and you're now living through a sped up, totally unpredictable period of it. And I know you may be tired of hearing about ascension symptoms. Maybe you've heard me over the years, over and over talking about them, and others too. But when you're in the middle of feeling like you're tumbling around, it's easy to forget that this is what you're experiencing, and that these symptoms are now more intense and complicated and confusing than ever before. As I say, you're essentially experiencing the death of your whole 3D identity and life. And you're also, at the same time, experiencing a birth into a whole new identity, something that's really exciting, but it's also a very chaotic and unfamiliar kind of experience at times. Remember, these times we've just recently entered are the most intense times of what has been called the transitional times, leading up to the momentous shift of the planet that occurs approximately every 26,000 years into a new reality that's been called the fifth dimension. And you probably know all this, but like I say, it's easy sometimes to forget it with everything that's going on. You can get caught up in all the challenges occurring in your life and forget to rise up into the big picture of what's happening and why you're here on the planet, what you're here to experience and do. So I'm going to talk here about all these different things that are happening, just spell them out so you can see more clearly what is causing so much to be happening, both in your personal life and on the planet. And then I'll give you some reminders about how you can maybe navigate all that's going on in the best way possible. As I say, essentially what's going on is both a death and a rebirth process that are occurring at the same time. In your death process, you are probably experiencing the arising of all your old dysfunctional patterns that need to be resolved and released. They're in the process of releasing. And old woundings that were never fully healed are also again arising within you to be revisited and finally released. And your old familiar 3D identities are falling away. This is a really big process. And at the same time, a rebirth is also occurring within you. Although this may seem, somewhat slower and less obvious at first. But as your old identities and patterns continue to be released, a whole new sense of yourself then has room to move in within you. If this rebirth has been happening for you, at least at times, you can probably feel like it's a larger, stronger, more expansive, more alive sense of self that is emerging within you, along with new open spaces of consciousness for you to live in. And you probably find magical synchronicities that are occurring more and more often. And new relationships are appearing for you to step into. And at times you may discover that somehow all your needs are being met surprisingly easily. And your dreams and desires seem to be suddenly manifesting. And this can sound fantastic, right? And it is. But because it's so new and you're still trying to get your feet under you, this rebirth too can initially cause a lot of chaos and confusion. In fact, at times this whole process can feel like, you're in a bottleneck, like there's an energy of being squeezed. You're realizing you need to let go of the familiar aspects of yourself, but then you realize, that you don't want to do it, but they need to be released so that the new you can be birthed more and more fully. It's a constant act of faith to just let go of these old aspects of yourself that seem to be leaving and that are so familiar and safe feeling. But you realize you just got to. So these new parts of you can begin to birth within you. So when your life starts getting difficult with all these things going on, it's just good to, keep all of this in mind. All the uncomfortable experiences you're having now probably have to do with the process of letting go of the old version of yourself so that the new you can come in. And yes, you've been in this transitional phase for a while now. You've likely already gone through a lot of letting go and transformation in the last few years. Maybe for many years now. But this whole process is now greatly speeding up and intensifying. And so events in your life can be startling and unstabilizing. You may have thought you'd be prepared for these times, but Perhaps you haven't realized just how chaotic and profoundly unsettling this ascension process is proving to be toward the end here, and how unprepared you actually are for it in certain ways. Like I say, it's as if we're in the middle of squeezing through a bottleneck from one reality into another one that's much, much higher in frequency. And although this is exciting in one way, it can also really be frightening at times, simply because the changes occurring both in your life and in the world can be so intense and often very sudden as well. So then, keeping aware of all this that's happening, it's helpful to also remember that one of the things that is further causing these symptoms more recently is the intensity of the sun flares that are getting increasingly stronger as time goes on. And this is essentially what the shift is going to be, right? One huge solar emission that will abruptly and powerfully flow onto the earth and profoundly change and shift everything energetically and physically on the planet into a much higher frequency. This, as I'm sure you know, has been referred to as the solar flash or the event, and has been predicted by many to be occurring soon, maybe even this year. And so these sun flares are being seen as precursors of the much larger event that's going to be happening. And yeah, I know there have been predictions for a number of years that the solar flash would be happening soon, and of course it hasn't just yet. But this, it is said, is because humanity hasn't been ready for it yet. Evidently, the light forces, the benevolent galactic forces who are assisting humanity to go through this shift, have been holding it off. They can do this in order to hopefully create a much less tumultuous event for humanity to experience. But sources are now saying that they can't hold it off much longer, that although the exact timing can't be predicted, it could actually happen this year. At any rate, during these times of this chaotic transition, now that we're getting closer and closer to the time of the actual shift, one of the other things that's been happening that has caused so much confusion and anxiety is that many of us have been bouncing back and forth between the 3D, 4D reality and the 5D reality. Both of these realities are available to us now. And this can be crazy-making because the realities are so very different, both in how reality actually functions and in how it feels to be in each of them. You might find that you're sailing along in what might feel like 5D to you. Like I was describing, new wonderful things are flowing into your life. You're feeling great. And you're assuming, this is where I'm living now. I've kind of made it. And then bam, some new challenge hits you again that you need to attend to, and you feel pulled back into 3D consciousness again. And part of this is due to the fact that we are also dealing with new, powerful, higher frequency energies that are flooding onto the planet now that can be so intense, they alone can create great confusion, causing rapid, unpredictable changes in our lives. And they're also impacting our physical bodies. Our bodies are going with us, remember? And so they too are being cleansed and upgraded, just as our emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies are. So it's no wonder we might be feeling overwhelmed and exhausted at times, just because of this. And then, of course, on top of all this that we're dealing with, we can add into the mix all that's happening in the outer world, right? And how the chaotic global events occurring are also impacting us. Just like within us, how all the old dysfunctional patterns and unhealed woundings and traumas are surfacing in order to be released, all of those in the outer world are going through this same process. Everything that's functioning at the lower 3D frequency has got to collapse, fall apart, and either be healed or be left behind. And this is actually finally happening. It seems very slowly at this point, and it's certainly taken a while. Many of us have known about and gone through the dark rabbit holes for a long time. But it does seem that, at long last, disclosure about the nefarious nature of just about all governments in the world and the people behind the scenes running things is just beginning to happen now, finally. And those of us who are especially empathic and sensitive to energies are feeling these chaotic planetary energies swirling around in the collective consciousness, adding to what we might also be experiencing in our personal lives. So it's important to remember this too, because what you're experiencing is probably not your own stuff. It's probably not your own personal stuff. It's stuff happening in the collective. Okay, and then there's yet another type of confusion we're dealing with. This one having to do with timelines. You may be aware that there are now two basic timelines that humanity is on that are now splitting further and further apart. There's a lot out there, people talking about this. And this subject of timelines is a complicated one. And there's actually no one agreement about what's exactly happening, to these timelines now. But one way to understand them is that, as I say, there are basically two collective timelines that humanity has been on actually since 2012, in my understanding. One of them leading into the fifth dimension, which, if you're listening to this, you are most likely on this one. And the other into a fourth dimensional reality for souls who are not yet ready to make the huge leap into 5D at this time. And these two timelines are now diverging more and more swiftly. And this is causing consternation and fear among many who are seeing certain family members and close friends who are seeming to really be drifting away from them at this point. It can be very unsettling to experience this. And then, on top of that phenomenon occurring with the collective timelines, it's important to understand that we also each have a number of different personal timelines that we are further shifting and jumping around on in our lives as well, depending on certain decisions we make and reactions we have to what's going on, and also when karmic patterns finally end. We just keep jumping around on different timelines. So this shifting on our personal timelines can also cause a sense of instability and some fear and confusion if you don't know what's going on. So I know this is all a lot, but there's still more going on that's important to keep in mind, and that may explain some of the experiences you're having. And one of these things is that the whole astral realm, which is a part of the old false 3D matrix we've been living in, is now in the process of collapsing. And part of what this means is that all the dark stuff that has lived in the lower part of this realm for thousands of years is now being released into our reality on this side of the veil, because the veil is thinning more and more. And this isn't to scare you. It's just to alert you to the fact that some of the dark energies and entities from this realm are now flying around us, knowing that they're on their way out because the frequency of the earth is rising and they can't go with it into this higher frequency. And so they're sometimes entering people's fields or attaching to them. Now, the good news is that in doing this, they're in a position in which they can be transmuted into light. But if they're with you, the process can sometimes be really uncomfortable. You can think you're feeling emotions like intense fear or anger or hatred that aren't even your own emotions. And your inner critic can suddenly get much louder and more insistent, if you've got these energies with you. So it's just one more thing to be aware of if you're feeling like there's something with you that doesn't feel familiar or comfortable. You're just being used as a light transmitter, a being that is serving to purify these lower frequencies into light. But if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. It's important then to really up the protection you put around yourself on a daily basis. Whatever it is, creating fields of light around you, calling in angels or ascended masters, or meditating more often. But, whatever you generally do to keep yourself safe and clear, just do your best at this and keep these unwanted energies out of your field. So, this is all a lot, right? It's no wonder if you're feeling unstable or confused or frightened or anxious. But now there's one last thing I want to tell you about that may also explain some of what you may be experiencing. And that's that in mid-August, the time I'm recording this, we're also apparently shifting into an even more intense time, a time when what's been called the Ascension portal will be opening on August 21st. Now, this is a very exciting event. This has been reported by a man whose code name is Cobra. He describes himself as a Pleiadian contactee, part of a team that's made up of both, benevolent galactic beings who are assisting humanity through these times, and also white hat human forces that have been working together with them for a long time. They've been helping to clear the whole galaxy and the Earth of dark forces that have been keeping humanity captive for many thousands of years. And after over 2 decades of reporting the progress of these light forces, Cobra is now reporting that a very powerful galactic shift is about to happen when a portal will be opening so that the solar flash, or the event, as he calls it, can occur very soon. And this, of course, is wonderful news. It's meaning we are getting closer now to the shift that will finally be happening. He describes how when this portal opens, things will almost immediately get somewhat easier for us, more peaceful and clearer in certain ways. But it may also initially cause further intensity within all of us, speeding up and increasing the changes that need to happen within us in order to get us ready for the shift. And it will also likely break open a lot of the disclosure events that have been waiting in the wings for many years to happen, which is also good news, but it may initially cause a lot of chaos among the majority of people in the world who have been asleep to all of it. So who knows? We'll see what happens. But this is just something else to keep in mind as time goes on in case you feel an increase in any intensity you're feeling during late August. And there is another thing to be aware of about all of this, and that's that in one way, everyone on the planet, no matter which collective timeline they're on, is experiencing some symptoms of this ascension process we're going through at this point. Just the daily news on the planet these days is enough to keep people anxious and confused and angry. Between the wars, the economic instability, the crazy politics, and the weird, unpredictable weather events that are happening. Even if people don't keep up with what's going on in the news, they can't help but pick up the crazy energies that are flowing through the collective in one way or another. But if you're a light worker, you're likely extra sensitive and empathic. And so you're probably going through these intense global changes and, more intensely than other people, and perhaps somewhat sooner than other people that you might know. You may be experiencing the energies more strongly than they are at this point because you're being prepared to step into an ever, increasingly important role in your life of assisting others to understand what is occurring on the planet. And this is especially so if you're what's been called a front runner, in the Ascension process. And that this is a light worker who's chosen the role of what could be called a pioneer or a scout on the path leading into the fifth dimension. Someone leading the way, so to speak, trying out the path in order to report back to others what to expect and how to best navigate the challenges along that path. So if you don't know anyone else who seems to be experiencing as much change and challenge in their life as you are at this time, know that they maybe haven't reached the same place in their ascension process that you have, or they're playing a different role than you are. And they may not even be on the same timeline you're on, leading into the fifth dimension. So it's going to be different for them. It's not as steep a climb in frequency as it might be for you. They're just shifting more fully into 4D, and you're going into 5D, a much higher frequency. So, a lot going on, right? A lot of energies hitting us all at once at this point, and they may feel negative, but really they're not. They're actually very positive for the most part. All of them are pushing us forward on our ascension path. But we still need to know how to handle it all during these times when we feel overwhelmed with anxiety and depression or uncertainty. So here are some suggestions. And probably the first thing to remember is that you need to slow down in your life if you can, and just stay awake to what is occurring within you at all times. Not be so distracted by what's happening outside of you. You need to take more time to rest and spend quiet time with yourself. And also get out of your head and become aware of what your body is experiencing. This is really helpful. So if possible, it's good also to get as much sleep as you can. Take time to meditate every day. Eat nourishing foods. Drink a lot of water. In other words, focus on basic self-care. And then also, when you're in emotional pain, stay aware of how you need to give yourself love and compassion. I know you know all this stuff, but it's just a reminder. Give yourself understanding. Give yourself slack. Watch those stupid inner critic messages coming at you. Don't believe them. Or if your body's in pain or discomfort, focus on it. Speak to it with love. Listen to what it's telling you. Listen to what it needs. And rather than focusing so intently on the future, especially in any kind of anxious way, stay in the moment. Take one day at a time. Remember to keep breathing. And when challenging things occur, try not to panic. Things and circumstances are changing all the time. You really can't predict a whole lot about what will be happening in the future, even the next day. And things that may look dire one day may actually turn on the dime the next. Or you'll find out it was necessary for this to happen, for a new, very positive experience to happen in the future. And of course, another thing is focus on any positive events or circumstances happening in your life. Bring in the feeling of gratitude for all you do have, all that is going well. Focus on the beauty you may find around you. Spend a lot of time in nature. And lastly, remember to trust that you are being guided, because you are. Not only by your higher self and spiritual guides, archangels, ascended masters, but also by benevolent galactics and nature beings. As you learn to trust this guidance, you can begin to see you really are being strongly yet gently guided along the best path possible for you to reach into the higher frequencies as quickly and smoothly as possible. So I hope this has been helpful for you as a reminder about all the many intense energies that are flowing around and through you these days, and how you need to keep aware of them and go easy on yourself when you fall into negative emotions and reactions is totally understandable. Keep remembering that this is a phase in the ascension process, a necessary one, and basically a benevolent one. And it's a temporary one. It won't go on forever. And remember that you can do this. As hard as it gets, you can. You can make it through. In fact, you've likely done it before. In other galaxies long ago, acting as a light worker and frequency holder for other civilizations that were going through the ascension, way back then. So you know how to do this. Just keep remembering this. You just need to keep going at this point, just one day at a time. So I send you much love on this arduous but very exciting journey. Many blessings to you.